Across the void, on the Imperial dreadnought Veracity, Grand Strategist Ulthar Vex watched the holographic display of Earth with a calculating stare. He had seen this before, the slow, chaotic rise of a civilization, the arrogant belief that they were different from the trillions before them. The Empire had seen countless species rise from dust, reach for the stars, and challenge their authority. None had succeeded. The Council's orders were clear. Remove Earth's leaders, and the planet would fall in line. Deploy the Void Reapers, Vex commanded, folding his hands behind his back. Let humanity understand the futility of resistance. The Void Reapers were more than assassins. They were a whisper in the dark, an inevitability. There were no grand invasions, no fleets blotting out the sky, just sudden, precise eliminations. One night, a planet had rulers. The next, it had chaos. As their drop pods pierced Earth's atmosphere, Commander Kira Voss of the Void Reapers reviewed her targets. Political leaders, military strategists, scientific pioneers cut the heads off the snake, and the body would writhe helplessly. It had worked 100 times before. Earth would be no different. The Council of Nations had received intelligence of the impending attack, though not in time to prepare a conventional defense. Not that it mattered. The Void Reapers weren't soldiers to be fought in open battle. They were ghosts. "We don't need an army," Captain Jonas Grimm Vance muttered, staring at the briefing screen. "We need something worse." The others, in the dimly lit war room, exchanged uneasy glances. Dr. Evelyn Park, renowned engineer, crossed her arms. "I assume you're not volunteering?" Jonas smirked. "We're sending a message, not a militia." He turned to the others. "We need the one thing they've never faced." Silence. Then Lieutenant Naomi Carter spoke, her voice almost a whisper. "You don't mean—" "Oh, I do." Jonas leaned forward. "Send in the Boogeyman." In a hidden facility, far from the public eye, a cell door slid open. A man sat alone in the cold, steel-walled chamber, the dim light casting his scarred face into sharp relief. John Reaper Kowalski, the ghost of 100 Black Ops missions, a man the government had buried years ago. Not in a grave, but in secrecy. The general standing outside the cell hesitated. "We have a situation." John didn't look up. He flexed his fingers, absently tracing the lines of old wounds. "Sounds like your problem." "We need you." That got his attention. Slowly he looked up, his gray eyes void of warmth. "Who's the target?" The general exhaled. "An elite kill squad. Alien. They think they're untouchable." John stood, stretching, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. Not for long. The Void Reapers expected resistance, but what they encountered was something else entirely. First target, a high-ranking general in Washington. The assassin, an 8-foot-tall reptilian named Zarkul, moved through the shadows, his suit rendering him almost invisible. He reached his mark's office, unseen, unstoppable. And yet, something felt wrong. The moment he stepped inside, the lights cut out. The door sealed behind him. And then, a whisper. "I see you." Zarkul spun, activating thermal vision. Nothing. Then, movement. A shape emerged from the darkness, moving faster than should have been possible. Zarkul was the first to disappear. The Void Reapers found his comms cut mid-transmission, his beacon blinking from a location he should never have gone, the middle of a deserted alley. When they arrived, they found him strung up upside down, alive but trembling, scrawled across. The wall, in something dark and viscous, were the words, "Run." Kira Voss listened to the garbled remains of Zarkul's transmission. It wasn't possible. Her team had never lost an operative this early. Earth should have been scrambling, unprepared for their presence. Instead, something was toying with them. They had become the prey. Tapping into their surveillance feeds, Kyra reviewed footage of Earth's response teams, expecting military coordination. Instead, she saw a handful of operatives, scattered and unpredictable. The footage showed glimpses of them. Jonas Vance, barking orders with a smirk, as if he were enjoying the chaos. Dr. Evelyn Park, rewiring tech with terrifying efficiency. Santiago Twitch Alvarez, hacking into enemy systems while cracking jokes over comms. Naomi Carter, always 3 steps ahead, predicting their moves before they made them. And then there was the other one. No name, no record, just a grainy image of a man moving through the shadows, leaving behind only fear. Kira's blood ran cold. This was no ordinary resistance. She clenched her fists. Find him before he finds us! Alec had been scanning the cityscape, rifle steady, when he heard the whisper, his claws tensed. Kira, did you hear? The streetlights below flickered. A shadow moved across the rooftops. Alec's heart rate spiked. He adjusted his scope, zooming in. His night vision should have illuminated everything. Instead, a figure moved between spectrums, slipping between heat and light like a ghost. Then his own rifle turned off. The heads-up display inside his visor scrambled, lines of corrupted code flooding his vision. His fingers tightened on the trigger, but the gun remained dead in his hands. He didn't hear footsteps, didn't feel the air shift, but something was there. Alec turned, instincts screaming. A hand shot from the darkness, wrapped around his throat and yanked him backward. The last thing he saw before the blackness swallowed him was the reflection of his own terrified eyes in a human's cold gray stare. Kira clenched her jaw, listening to Alec's sudden gasp, then silence. Another marker on her HUD winked out. Another Reaper gone, Drawl hissed. They're picking us off! Kira forced herself to stay calm. Regroup! Now! The 4 remaining Reapers converged at a secondary location, a derelict subway station beneath the city. It was secure, silent, defensible. They formed a tight perimeter, weapons drawn, senses heightened, and yet Kira could feel it. He was here. Drawl's mandibles clicked in agitation. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Tarkus, the team's demolitionist, growled, pacing. They weren't supposed to know we were coming. Kira's fists clenched. She had led countless missions, taken down entire planetary governments. She had never lost control like this. Then the station lights flickered. A sound echoed from the tunnels. Not an explosion, not gunfire, laughter, not the joyous kind, low, amused, predatory. Tarkus fired into the dark. The shot lit up the tunnel, empty. But when the light faded, the laughter only grew. A second later, the power grid for the entire station failed. Total darkness. A whisper slid through the air. You should have stayed in the shadows. Kira fired. Drawl fired. Sparks erupted from the stone walls. Their own gunfire illuminated flashes of something moving between them. Too fast, too controlled. Tarkus screamed. A shape appeared behind him, a knife flashing across his throat, his gurgled cry cut short. His body collapsed, a crimson smear on the station floor. Drawl turned to run. A shadow moved. A sickening crack followed. Drawl's body hit the ground, his neck twisted at an impossible angle. Kira's breath came fast and sharp. 2 of them left. She reached for her comm. Base, this is Kira. A sharp click. Her signal was jammed. She turned to her last squad mate. We move, now! They bolted for the surface. The tunnels stretched before them, suffocating and endless. Every shadow felt alive. Every corner held the promise of something waiting. Then, they reached the exit ladder. Salvation. Kira shoved her squad mate forward. Go! The Reaper climbed. His claws scrambled against the metal rungs. He was almost at the top. A hand shot out from the dark, grabbed his leg, yanked him down. Kira caught a glimpse of his panicked eyes, mouth opening to scream, before he vanished into the void below. Silence. Then the whisper came again. Close. Right behind her ear. "You're the last one!" Kira spun, blade in hand. But there was nothing. Just darkness. Her breathing came fast, ragged. She tried to focus. Regroup. Think. A faint glow flickered in the distance, a single terminal, still active. She sprinted for it, hands flying across the keys, trying to send a distress signal, a warning, anything. The screen glitched, then a single line of text appeared. Run. The laughter returned. She ran. Kira ran, her breath sharp and ragged, the rhythmic pounding of her boots against the tunnel floor drowned out by the deafening silence around her. She had lost her squad. All of them. The Void Reapers, legends of the Empire, trained in 1,000 ways to kill, had become prey to something far worse than they had anticipated. This wasn't a mission anymore. This was a nightmare. She reached a service ladder and climbed, each rung slick with sweat and blood. As she emerged onto the dimly lit street above, her muscles burned, her vision swam, but she kept moving. A plan. She needed a plan. Her wrist console flickered. Comms were still down, jammed. Her ship was docked miles away outside the city's perimeter. Too far. She had no backup, no weapons beyond the knife strapped to her thigh, and no certainty that she could survive the next 5 minutes, but she wasn't going to die here. She needed to regroup, reassess. The Empire had to know what they had walked into. She sprinted into an alleyway, sticking to the shadows, her instincts screaming at her that she was still being hunted. A sound, soft, deliberate, brushed against the night air behind her. She whirled, blade in hand. Nothing. Then a voice. Low, amused. Too close. "You should have brought more friends." Kira lunged, striking where the voice had come from. The blade met air. Then suddenly, a hand closed around her wrist. Cold. Unrelenting. With inhuman speed, she was flung backward, her back slamming against the alley wall. Pain exploded through her ribs. She gasped, her vision blurring as the figure stepped into the pale glow of a distant street lamp. A human. Not a soldier. Not a politician. Something else. John Kowalski. She didn't know his name. The Empire had no records of him. The Void Reapers had never failed a mission before, so there had never been a reason to investigate Earth's monsters. But now she understood. He wasn't just a man. He was the thing people whispered about when they feared the dark, the Boogeyman. She forced herself to stand, muscles screaming in protest. "You think you've won?" she spat, blood dripping from her lips. John tilted his head slightly, like a predator watching wounded prey. "Have I?" Kira's mind raced. The Empire would send reinforcements. They had to. "You kill me," she said, steadying herself. "And my people will wipe this planet from existence." John exhaled slowly, almost like he was bored. "Maybe." Kira took a shaky breath. "You're just delaying the inevitable." John smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not delaying anything." He stepped forward, and before she could react, he tossed something at her feet, a small device, blinking red. Kira's eyes widened. A tracker. Her blood ran cold. She had led them right to the Empire's extraction point. She barely had time to register what had happened before John turned and vanished back into the shadows. Kira stood frozen for a long moment. Then, realization crashed over her like a wave of ice. This wasn't about her anymore. Earth wasn't just fighting back. They were hunting the hunters, and the Void Reapers had just led them straight to their next target. Kira stood in stunned silence, her breath shallow, her mind racing. The tracker at her feet pulsed with a slow, ominous rhythm. How long had it been broadcasting? How many of her people had already been compromised? Panic threatened to claw its way up her throat, but she swallowed it down. Think, act, survive. The Empire's extraction team would be inbound soon, expecting survivors. They'd land, regroup, reassess. But now, they were the ones walking into a trap. John Kowalski had played her, used her. She spun on her heel and sprinted down the alley. If she could reach the rendezvous first, she could warn them. They might still have a chance. A voice crackled over her wrist console. The jamming was gone. Commander Voss, a clipped voice reported. This is Dropship Nexus 3, inbound to extraction coordinates. Sit, Rep? She sucked in a breath. Mission failed. Do not land. Repeat, do not land. It's a trap. A pause. Clarify. She didn't get the chance. A single streak of light arced through the sky. Silent. Precise. The dropship's signal cut out. Kira looked up just in time to see a ball of fire blossom in the clouds, the wreckage of Nexus 3 plummeting toward the city outskirts. A chill crawled up her spine. They were waiting for them. This wasn't a desperate human defense. It was an ambush, a war on their terms. She bolted for higher ground, her body moving on pure instinct. Her squad was dead. Her extraction was gone. Her only chance now was to get off-world, to warn the fleet before they made the same mistake. She reached an abandoned rooftop and scanned the horizon. The explosion had drawn attention. Emergency sirens, flickering lights, distant shouting. And beyond that, shadows moved. Not human, not her people. Something else. The Boogeyman hadn't just set the trap. He had called for backup, a rustle of fabric, the whisper of a blade unsheathing. Kira turned slowly. John Kowalski stood at the edge of the rooftop, arms crossed, watching her with that same apathetic amusement. You didn't listen, he said. Kira's grip tightened around her knife. You think this ends here? She growled. John's expression didn't change. It ended the moment you stepped on our planet. A low hum filled the air. More trackers. Activating. Dozens of them. Kira's stomach dropped. They weren't just hunting her anymore. They were hunting the entire invasion force. Her blood ran cold as she realized the truth. Earth wasn't afraid of the Empire. Earth had been waiting for them.